welcome to Bermuda's News and Views. I'm your host, Don Burgess, and tonight we are here celebrating the one-year anniversary of Social Justice Bermuda. And with us is Katora Horton, Parent Chief. Welcome.
Thank you.
Kristen White.
Good evening.
And Misha Fugler.
Hey, how you doing?
We'll start with what was the ignition point for the foundation of Social Justice Bermuda last year? Kristen?
Oh, sorry, my thing dropped a little bit. What was the question?
What was the ignition point for the foundation of Social Justice Bermuda?
So there were a few different events. I mean, obviously we were watching the Black Lives Matter marches play out across the U.S., as a direct response to the murder of George Floyd. So that same week, we read that the new U.S. Consul General, Leandro Rizzuto Jr., was being appointed, and it was sort of happening, seemed like very quietly. A lot of people didn't really know about it. So we weren't, I read that with horror. So that was definitely a part of it. And then, Dr. Eva Hudson died, and that was also, for me personally, I felt like a galvanizing moment. I've always been inspired by her life and her legacy. And so, it was on Bermuda Day. It was Bermuda Day weekend, and we're watching all of this play out globally, and then these things are happening locally, and it just didn't feel like a coincidence to me. It felt like these were all happenings of the same circumstance, that they were all connected. And so when I put up a couple of posts just saying like, this is really awful that this guy is being promoted to this position. He'd been, turned down for a position in Barbados by his own Republican Senate, viewed as inappropriate for that, as a crackpot, a conspiracy theorist. And we just had no choice but to accept him, was the general sentiment. But the second that I put it up, a lot of people were like, yeah, I saw that and I didn't like that either. And so it all came together. It just seemed like a lot of people were feeling the same thing. They're feeling that same sentiment about him, but also were feeling moved that the Black Lives Matter movement, yes, it was playing out in the United States, but it was inspiring people to act locally. So to, yes, be in solidarity with what's happening in the United States and around the world, but to think about how injustice manifests itself wherever you are, and to address that. And so that was the galvanizing point for us to form.
I want to ask each of you, and we'll start with Katora, how you each became involved with Social Justice Bermuda and what drew you to the organization. So Katora, if you can start.
So I guess, there wasn't quite an organization when we joined. So I think I saw Kristen's post, and I was one of those who responded and said, obviously, we're not going to just sit down and let him come here. And as she said, we were motivated and the time was ripe for us to move. So for me, I think it was just getting a lot of feedback from our fellow Bermudians on that post. It came together over a WhatsApp group. We formed Social Justice Bermuda over a WhatsApp group, which was, it was incredible, just sort of how groundbreaking it was. And like Kristen said, it came together, a collective of Bermudians who want to do better for Bermuda. And here we are.
Yeah. And Misha, same question?
I have a similar response. I responded to Kristen's social media post. I'd been following her writing online. I think she's got the blog at kristen.com, and I was in agreement with many of the positions that she was taking. And so when I saw the call to people interested in trying to stop Rizzuto, I reached out to say I'd like to help where I can.
And then Kristen, you've already sort of gone over that with your initial statement. It's been a year after almost 7,000 people took part in the Black Lives Matter protests. And as a matter of fact, I remember walking a bit on Court Street with Katora and her mom there for a little bit down past the Cabinet building, which Social Justice Bermuda took part in. You didn't organize it, but you supported it. How do you think Bermuda is different a year later?
Is that for me?
All of
I was like, yeah, Misha, what did you say?
Yeah, sure. I don't, not really. It was a great sentiment. I mean, it was an amazing turnout of people who were showing their solidarity with the movement, primarily United States focused. Um, there doesn't really seem to be like a continuation of that movement in the average populace. 7,000 people showed up, but are those 7,000 people still advocating for the ideals that were the reason for having the march in the first place?
right. Victoria, do you want to add to that?
You know what? I am an eternal optimist, and I would like to think that a spirit of activism and just a spirit of advocacy has gripped Bermuda. And I hope, I mean, I've seen a lot of, I mean, we've seen dialogue like nothing else really around just some of our calls to action, Rizzuto, the police post that nobody liked, collective worship, cannabis reform. We've gotten a lot of education. We've gotten a lot of feedback that, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a perfect storm at this point, and I hope the movement keeps going. But I have seen, I would say I've seen a little bit of a difference. I've seen Bermudians becoming more vocal, not just on social media, but we've seen protests. We've seen people put their feet in the streets, and whether or not we can mobilize behind them is irrelevant. It's an incredible sentiment, I think, to stand up for what you believe in and to put your feet to the street and fight for that.
Right. Chris, do you share those sentiments, or do you want to add something?
I mean, I'm similar to both of them. I think I too am a delusional optimist, so I grasp onto like any life raft of like change. I think one of the things that has definitely come about, and this is not just in Bermuda, but this is a global shift, is that there has been a definitely more lip service paid to this idea of diversity and inclusion, right? So we've seen a burgeoning in companies, in the international business companies, especially here in Bermuda, where now they have more diversity and inclusion departments. They're doing different events. I know Curb has been doing lots of workshops. They had seen their membership go up as people were starting to want to learn more about the history of racism in Bermuda. And so I think we maybe are at I think we have an opportunity that did start last year. And in some cases, we have been able to leverage that interest. I think more people have been, taking the first step of like buying the books, but are they reading the books? That was the big thing that came out of the Black Lives Matter movement in the States, was that you could not get, books about race, like Ibram Kendi, Igio Maluluo, like their books were sold out. Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility, like her speakers' fees went through the roof. So even in like looking at The Reckoning, white people were still making more money off of racial oppression. So there was definitely these moments of like, oh, this is great, and then, oh no, it's not wonderful. So I think I go back and forth between Misha and Katora like every day. Like sometimes I'm like, nothing is different, and then I'm like, okay, maybe something's different. So it depends on the day. I would say today I feel like there's a little bit more happening with Bermudians being more vocal. And I've seen that, especially in, like I said, that diversity inclusion area. There are committees of Black people in insurance in these sectors meeting right now and being more vocal about what they want to see different in their industry. And hopefully it starts there and spreads across to other industries where Black people have been disenfranchised on this island. So yeah, I would say I'm a little optimistic today.
Yeah. Now, I guess the protests in front of the American Consulate, I remember at least three. There may have been more than that, but at least three. And why did you feel it was necessary to protest the appointment of Lee Rizzuto? Christian, you were sort of the voice and the front person for those.
Yeah. So there were two protests at the U.S. Consulate, and then there was another. We did have another march, but that was centered around Heroes Weekend and celebrating the history of activism in the country. And so, you know, there's no secret that I personally and us as an organization were anti-Trump. We feel very strongly that he was unsuitable to be in a leadership position, that he has a history and a present of racism, of fascism, of sexism. And for him to remove a diplomat from this position that was there, and yes, you know, whoever is president has that right to put these people in these positions. But for him to do that and remove Constance Spearman before her rule was up and put in a person that had already been deemed unfit by his own Republican Senate, a person that has donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to Trump, and that's why he was getting this position, a person who had made anti-woman, anti-Muslim statements, had put conspiracy theories, like the craziest QAnon theories on his own social media, to the point that Republicans said he was a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. This man was not fit to serve in this role. And the second that you allow those sentiments to take root, so we saw even just under the article about his appointment, you saw all of the Trump supporters, the Make America Great Again comments coming in the anonymous section. And I just felt so strongly that the second you allow that to take root, then all of a sudden it's spreading, you know, it's spreading wider, and it's taking a hold in your community. And then it's a call, a clarion call for visitors. Oh, come over here. This is a place where we love Trump supporters. Like, it was too much. I've already had to do tours with people wearing Trump hats, and I was just like, I cannot do this. I cannot live in a place where this man is actually a leader in this country. So it was a no-brainer for me. And then when he did come here, the interview that we saw showed he was anti-Black Lives Matter. He said craziness throughout his entire interview. And so that at that stage, it seemed reinforced that we were right to have said he shouldn't have been here. And even since that time, an entire thesis, a statement, a report came out showing the impact that Trump appointed diplomats have had around the globe, that it has been a scourge around the globe. And we, you know, sadly had a piece of that. So that to me it was the first move that we made. And yes, there were people that felt strongly that we were maybe jeopardizing U.S. Bermuda relationships. But I didn't care. And also, though a lot of people didn't know this, I am American. My dad is a veteran. I was like, for people to say I don't have a right to say I don't want this man here didn't make any sense. So I, as an individual, as an American, as a Bermudian, as a person, as a human, as a Black woman, was standing up to say no to this man. It was a no-brainer to me that he should not be here.
We have a little clip that we want to play from those protests, if we can run that.
No space for racism! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Make sure you sign if you haven't signed. Reject! Rizzuto! In honor of George Floyd, in honor of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, every Black person, guns down in the house, Larry Patrick, Buck Burrows, Sally Bassett, Mary Prince.
What sort of emotion and feelings does that bring up watching that? Dora?
Yeah, goosebumps. Whenever I see it, it's like, you know, first of all, you know, the fact that it was, I don't know if everybody knows this, but that was organized in a day. That was organized overnight. And it was based on sheer emotion. And I mean, just a common desire to not have that level of racism, that level of, oppression really come to our shores. And as Kristen said in her chat, 21 square miles is no place for racism. So yeah, like it's amazing to watch what we were able to accomplish in just a few short hours, really.
All right. Misha, your thoughts on seeing that clip?
I mean, it's amazing that it's been a year already of activity with, a group of volunteers spending their evenings and weekends and daytimes organizing activities like this that speak to our mission and our statement that you can see on our website, socialjusticebda.com, and that it was effective. He made a response on the nightly news. It's not like it was something that could be ignored. And for me personally, the justification was us signifying that type of leadership was unacceptable. He's emblematic of the worst parts of capitalism, an heir to an empire that he didn't build, someone who paid his way into a diplomatic position in a subtropical paradise. Like, that's not what needs to happen in our relationship with one of our largest trading partners.
Yeah. I found it a little bit, a little bit ironic that the temporary appointment after him actually gave testimony to the U.S. Senate about Trump's activities in the Ukraine. So just the
maybe they're trying to make amends. I know from an organizing perspective, we have the task force focused on cannabis legalization and restorative justice in that space, and decisions that will positively impact those who have been a victim of prohibition. They're sitting. That's the gateway right there, right? The consulate is going to be relating the types of requests we send back. The government has allowed people to apply to have their possession records expunged, but it doesn't make a difference since the U.S. consulate is the one that decides if you need to apply for an exemption to travel to the U.S. for school or whatever else.
I know. I had a little bit of a moment last year, and I think Couture might have commented on my Facebook post when I did it, was saying, like, I'm not reporting on amounts of cannabis that are going to be decriminalized or legalized in the new framework, because there's no point in putting people's names up on the internet from that point on. But why is Social Justice Bermuda advocating for this reform, and do you think that what the government's proposed has gone far enough?
Because it's in the name. It's a social justice component. People are disenfranchised through their run-ins with the law over minuscule amounts of cannabis. Simple cannabis possession is ruining their lives. They're losing access to education. There's other implications around doing trade with the U.S. If you want to start your own business, you can't go and purchase the things. I lost my train of thought there a little bit, but yeah, so restorative justice, this is an opportunity to right historical wrongs. And at this point, now that they're still in the kind of design phase of what regulation of the cannabis industry will look like, it's important that we make sure that it doesn't end up like the markets in the US, like California, where people who entered the market with large amounts of capital and still pushed out those who should be seeing the benefit of finally ending prohibition against cannabis.
Right. I know, like in the U.S. Sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
I was just going to say, to add into what Misha was saying, this is a law that we know has disproportionately impacted Black people. So when we look at, and this is something that CURB research has shown, whether we're looking at the stop and search legislation, or whether we're looking at, these instances of Black people, Black Bermudians being disproportionately stopped and found and fined and imprisoned for cannabis. And so it is a systemic issue. It is a racial justice issue. And as Misha said, it's an opportunity for a reparational response. And so for us, it was out the gate very important for our criminal justice reform section to have a sub-team focused solely on cannabis reform, which Misha has been heading up and a key part of taking forward. So, that was from the very beginning, it was like, yes, there's many different elements of criminal justice reform that we are tackling and looking at, but because especially we knew the cannabis reform bill was coming up, there was a team working just on that. And we submitted several lengthy responses to the proposed bill. And so, yeah, I think as Misha said, and as we, as social justice has said repeatedly, the legislation does not go far enough to be restorative and to be the full reparational initiative that it could be.
Right. Misha, just to stay on this point just a little bit,
Yeah.
looking, because in the U.S., each state comes up with their own sort of plan and format as how they're doing it, and Canada's done it as well. What do you think would be the best example for Bermuda to follow if it was going to take a blueprint from somewhere else?
I think our situation is unique because we're still in British overseas territory. We're beholden to whatever the UK decides is far enough in the decriminalization, legalization of cannabis. In the US, the piecemeal approach I don't think works. You can look at the businesses in California and Colorado. They can't interact with the banking system. And that's one of the primary barriers to really getting the market going here in Bermuda. Because the places that supply the materials can't ship to you and you can't pay them.
Okay. One of the other marches you took part was with Chevelle Dillon Burgess Say Her Name campaign. How did you, and so when I say you, I mean Social Justice Bermuda, help aid that?
Do you want to speak to that, Katora?
Katora?
Oh, yeah, I can. I absolutely can. I mean, I feel as though, we were such vocal advocates for women's rights anyway. So piggybacking off of Breonna Taylor, Black women are so often not held up in the spotlight, not really focused on, and we seem to be swept under the rug a lot of the time. And then along comes one of our own who is missing. And there seem to be just, how do we help? How do we help amplify the voices of the people who are trying to find this mother, this Black woman who has gone missing on our shores? So it was really important to us to take a really hard-nosed, hard stand with the people who are supportive of that entire movement. So she's still missing. We need her back. We need to find out what has happened. And she's important, and all of us are important.
And so we had, been looking at how we could support, and one of the ways was in increasing the reward money. So the money that Crime Stoppers puts up for information leading to, an arrest or anything related to a crime is sort of a standard amount. But we had seen that, when there had been a situation where, a dog had been killed at Admiralty House, the community quickly raised thousands and thousands of dollars for a reward. So the same amount of money that was going forward, and this is obviously nothing to do with Crime Stoppers. Like I said, that they're an incredible organization and that's their standard reward. But we said if the community can come together to raise money to find out what happened to a dog, then surely we can raise money to find out what happened to this young woman. And so there was another very vocal advocate, a lawyer, Tawana Tannick, and I'd spoken to her, and she was saying that she really wanted to look into raising the money, and she was sending some private letters. She didn't want to sort of make, she doesn't like to be a very visible public person. So I was like, again, as Katora said, for us, it is sometimes just about amplifying what else is happening. So with that, we were able to, say we need to raise more money. We need to put more money to this reward. And today I believe it's at a $50,000 reward instead of what it was before, which was a few thousand. I think it was a $3,000 reward. And the dog reward had been at $5,000. So actually it was more that had been raised for the dog. And I love dogs. But I'm just saying, if we can do it for a dog, we can do it certainly for, as Katora said, a woman, a mother, a fellow Bermudian. And so that was part of what we did, was raising money. We passed, we partnered with Safe Spaces Bermuda. They spoke at our march, and then we had a jug that we passed around, and we raised money and contributed to that. And then as well, in the end, I think all of the voices, everything that everyone was doing, contributed to that. That money being raised, that reward being raised. And so it was important for us to say her name, to speak her name, and we did that during that march, the last march that we held.
Now, I guess somebody might think that all the positions that you take, certain segments of the community, are controversial, but maybe one that might be the most controversial is your recent rally against school prayer. Explain your stance on this.
Compulsory
worship.
Right. Like, school prayer is fine if it's voluntary.
Compulsory prayer.
Yes. Who wants to tackle that one? I can go, whatever. I mean, for us, it's always an issue of, is something systemically disenfranchising a portion of the community? And so we knew through personal stories, through things that were shared with us directly. It was in our platform, so the fact that it caught people off guard just means they're not reading the platforms. But anyway, so it was in our 2020 platform that we were against compulsory worship in schools, because we feel it disenfranchises a portion of the community. So that
I feel sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So, it's racism is so visible to people. People understand racism. They understand sexism. They understand homophobia. But in an admittedly Christian supremacist society, nobody understands that there is a Christian supremacy here. And that if that is the platform on which all of our Muslim children, our Baha'i children, our non-denominational children, our atheist children, that's where they have to stand. It's very, if you can look at it through the lens of social justice, which is equal opportunity to worship whomever you believe in or choose to believe in, then it's a little bit easier to see. Nobody said don't worship or don't pray. It was just the compulsory forced worship within a public school system that should be open to all.
I want to just highlight Toby Butterfield's comment, because she's got the website up there, www.socialjusticebda.com, for every position that Social Justice Bermuda has taken. We're not going to get to them all tonight, but I encourage people to go and go to the website and to look at. So talking about compulsory prayer.
Dark.
And I had to adjust my light a little bit. I may have to.
The sun went down.
Sunset. I want to talk about Bermuda's going through education reform with the creation of signature schools and the elimination of middle schools. What are your thoughts on this and how it's proceeding? Kristen? Or
sorry. No, well, unfortunately, none of any of us will do. None of us here are on the education task force, are we? But they've done an incredible job.
Chat, but I'm not an active member in that group. I'm there more as like marketing.
Okay.
Support.
So we definitely,
but
it's a small group of dedicated people, professionals, and concerned individuals who are giving of their time and engaging in the process. And we saw this was a space to, again, amplify the message and try and raise awareness. And regardless of your position on the compulsory worship, you are paying attention to what's going on in the schools now, because everybody's been talking about it. And I think that's a good thing. Is this the right approach? It might be too early to see. There were some design choices for the process that were made that we're not 100% in agreement with. There's a lot of expectation that those putting in the sweat equity are doing so voluntarily, while the professionals are getting paid, and they've been paid and they've done their small piece, and some of them have left now, and it's been left to volunteers. If this is a primary priority of the government, then you would think they would allocate more funding to make sure that the people who are engaged in it, yes, they should be passionate and should want to volunteer, but they should also be compensated for their time.
We felt very strongly about that, about this use of an Australian consulting team, that they were paid an extensive amount of money, and that for us, that was right out the gate. We are now sort of paying colonizers to continue colonizing our system. We felt very, but that was already done. I think that was something that had happened even before Social Justice Bermuda formed. So for us, it was about supporting the process, even if we didn't agree with certain elements of it, that we feel very strongly that the public education system is the system that deserves our attention and our investment. So, that has been an ongoing part. I know when people talked about our compulsory worship system, they said that we were using it as a way to trash the public school system. But we, in fact, believe so much in this system and believe it is a core system for there to be social justice and economic equity, that the public school system has to work for the majority of our students. So for us, it is very much that we believe so wholeheartedly in public school system. We've even talked about asking people to divest from private school, but that's a conversation for another day. But we feel very strongly that public school needs all of our investment and all of our attention. And so, as Misha said, members of our education task force, who a great deal remain anonymous because they are heavily involved in the education redesign process. And so they are looking through their involvement there to implement as much as they can social justice principles along the way. So, even if we're not speaking loudly about some of these initiatives that are underway, many times there are social justice Bermuda people engaged in these processes and using them as an opportunity to constantly remind people that what we're talking about is racial equity. We're talking about opportunity, and that needs to be at the forefront in conversations about education, healthcare, criminal justice, all of those different issues that there needs to be social justice, a social justice lens, and that's what we're doing for education as well.
And that it extends past S4 because part of your platform also is to free public university 4-year at Bermuda College as well. Why do you feel like that's important? That
I don't think we said free,
but
we
free?
didn't say free. We said 4-year.
4-year.
University.
Yeah, full university.
Not free.
Okay. That would be nice too, but that's not what we're pushing for, right? But you just need to look at the stats when they do the census and look at revenues split by race and the types of professions that people hold. To not have easy access to tertiary education is a significant limiting factor. And the Bermuda College is doing excellent things. I know they partnered with PACE for some of their programs, but it is still relatively limited, and the college itself is still only offering 2-year programs outside of the partnerships with PACE in IT, which is relatively new, which is great to see, and finance, which is, it is what it is. We're Bermuda. But yeah, places that do well put a focus on their education, and the education should flow through to college, but undergraduate and graduate level.
Well, and this idea that this, when you think about going to study in either America or Canada, in order to get a visa, you have to demonstrate that you have the money for the year up front. And you can't work in those jurisdictions when you're there as a student unless you work on campus. So there's no working your way through university. You have to get a visa, and in order to do that, you've got to show that you have a bank account with $30,000, $40,000 sitting in it for this student's education. So it is absolutely an issue of economic disparity, and the people that can afford to send their children to university, or the students that we see for a great deal, they're packing up, they're going to England because now we can go there. Remember, that wasn't always an opportunity, but now they're going there, and they're experiencing some other obstacles around racial injustice and a class system that they're not familiar with. So, you know, there are limitations and obstacles that occur when we're talking about every student going overseas to obtain a bachelor's degree, which, as we know, is in many cases just what you need for entry level positions in our primary money making industry. So it absolutely is an issue of economic disparity, which, as we know, in this country tends to be a racial issue that disproportionately impacts Black people.
And especially when we think of even the preparation work that it takes to get to the university and college level, it just comes full circle back to what we're trying to achieve in the education reform here. Are we able to prepare children, no matter which system their families can put them in, to get to the next level if they want to do so? And that's basically what it boils down to. And we've spoken very loudly about the decolonization of our education system and ensuring that the level of empowerment that is infused in the children in the private school system is also infused in those children in the public school system. And that's all of these children, whether or not they can pay for an education.
I know I've gotten to see a few social studies lessons at the middle school level, and I know one of the one unit that one class is using right now is just on the Caribbean and all the things that have happened. So our Caribbean cousins. So I haven't seen the whole curriculum, but I know like the slices that I've seen the last couple of months have been involved and are doing that. So you'd be happy, you'd be proud. I don't know how it was back in our day, but probably not the same. I think people are a little bit more socially conscious about making sure that comes to the forefront.
But Don, you know, it goes further than a class, right? It goes much further than a class. This is about decolonizing an entire system that has been built on a system of white supremacy. So, you know, Black history did not start at slavery. So, you know, Bermeems had put out something today, which was really incredible. You know, we're going through looking at our last names, seeing where we came from. And, you know, that's the type of history that we need to be teaching in our schools, and that's what social studies should look like, yes, but also that's what science should look like, that's what math should look like. So at the end of the day, I think Social Justice Bermuda just wants that. And it's not just racial equality, obviously. We've spoken in our platform about disallowing, this is Pride Month, so disallowing anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric in schools and ensuring that all of our kids feel that that is a safe space in which they can come and learn and exist and grow.
To switch topics here very abruptly. The minimum wage report was released this last week, and I had Cordell Riley and a couple of members of the Wage Commission on Monday. What are your thoughts on the price points that they have for the minimum wage to start with, and your thoughts that they're going to wait a whole another year before the livable wage comes out, before moving forward on creating some floor level for pay for people? Kristen?
We should have had someone from our economic equity team who has researched and digested that report. So I can't speak to it with any great, experience on it. I mean, as we said, we're a big team and not all of us are reading and responding to every report, but obviously we support wholeheartedly a living wage. And, you know, when we submit our response, we will be able to be a little bit more. I don't know if either of you have even had a
I've
chance.
seen the headlines. I haven't had a chance to dig into the
Yeah.
report. One thing that's often the refrain of big business or just business in general, whenever they start talking about minimum wage, is, oh, it's just going to make things more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at sustainable development goals for a lot of these large corporations, they can find the money to spend more in their processes if they want to, if it looks good. And to try and discredit the paying people enough to survive just feels disingenuous. Livable wage should definitely be the target. I'm glad to see that they're at least asking people to investigate these types of things, but as per usual, they can do more and they should.
Yeah. Well, I know, like, I think it was Craig Simmons, because he's on the panel as well, and he said, yes, prices will go up. Businesses are generally in favor of raising the wages of worker and having a minimum. And even though the prices will go up, the exponential of giving them a living wage or a minimum wage will outweigh the cost factor. So
Yeah.
based on the
The
economic.
prices go up
And it
regardless of
makes
the wage,
sense.
Don, right? There's inflation.
It makes sense that if more people have disposable income, then you as a business will also
Will
benefit.
thrive. Yeah.
Your workers want to eat at restaurants too. Your workers want to be able to shop too. So, that's one of the things that we were talking about, is like looking at other places where they felt like, other small towns where they felt like, oh, if we implement a minimum wage, what's going to happen? And what they found was actually it helped the businesses, because people now, had money. And at the end of the day, what we've seen over the last year and a half, certainly, but what people have known for some time, but the last year and a half definitely reinforced that it's workers that create the economy. It's workers that bring the value. So this idea that, there's unskilled labor, or there are workers that don't deserve to make a living wage. Well, what happened this last year and a half? Who all of a sudden was an essential worker? The grocery store person, the person keeping the streets clean, the person, working the front desk at the pharmacy. So these unskilled jobs we saw over the last year and a half actually is what keeps the economy going. And instead of us constantly looking at, okay, the value is being created for the shareholder, and the worker never gets to share in the success of the business that they are literally making a success, then that's part of the problem. So yeah, we are going to submit a formal response, but that's just our informal emotional response.
And my emotional response is that it shouldn't be taking a year, because this is not a new conversation. This is absolutely something that has been going on. So, I mean, the delay seems excessive, and I hope that they can get their lives together before a year from now.
Yeah. All right. What also on your platform, you're talking about the tax structure. I don't know if there's anybody here on the committee who can necessarily address that, but how we can make that more fair for all of Bermuda.
Just tax the rich more. I don't think that there should be a limit on, if you make this amount of money, then you're taxed up to this level, but then above that, you're not taxed. Tax them, and don't pull back. Don't say, oh, we're concerned that if we tax their money, they're going to flee to another jurisdiction. Tax them more, and then take the taxes from the cannabis reform and put that as well into reparational initiatives and restorative justice. So yeah, tax them. Give them the tax. This idea, oh yes, I see a comment, trickle down is a myth. Exactly. This idea that if they have this amount of money that's tax free, then they're going to trickle it down. They're going to invest in business. They're going to do all these things. No, they're not. Take their money, tax them.
We just look at the disparity between working people and the stock market in the US to kind of disprove this idea that less taxes is going to be better for everyone. Platforms that give the proletariat access to the stock market even actively restrict them when people are making too much money. So, I mean, miss me with that. They got to go back to the drawing board with a better excuse as to why we can't start to have these companies that funnel the hundreds of millions of dollars through our economy not give back to the things we need to thrive as a people.
Well, we saw a little bit of a reaction to that when the people took action on their own through buying GameStop and a couple other stocks through Robinhood.
That was amazing.
Yes, that's what I'm alluding to. But Robinhood stopped the sales. And then also stopped people from canceling their sale orders. So in effect, there's still disenfranchising because that's an easy access if you're American. We can't trade through Robinhood as Bermudians. But even the little guy trying to get in on that action was being stopped because it was affecting one of the other holdings of the parent company of Robinhood.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. You know, when the people tried to make matters in their own hand, the big boys decided, oh, that's unfair.
Yeah.
Because their bottom line was being affected.
It's too volatile. We have to stop the trading, Don.
Through all the things that you guys have been speaking out about and being very vocal, some people have proclaimed you as Bermuda's unofficial opposition party. Do you feel this name fits? Katori, you're laughing, so you might as well answer first.
This is terrible. So I will say that the opposition to any government should be the people. So if we are the voice of the people, then so be it. You know, we've listened, we've tried to act based on what our supporters and people who have contacted us, what they need and what resonates with us, really, you know? So although I will stop short of calling us that, and Kristen has coined the actual opposition something, I think it's cute, the six. But when you have a government that has such a huge majority, it is time for us to use our voices and amplify. So maybe, but I think overall the people should be holding their government, their elected officials accountable no matter what, even if Social Justice Bermuda didn't exist. I'm glad that we do and that we can amplify those voices and assist and again mobilize. But even if we didn't, the power remains in the hands of the people.
Kristen, would you like to add to that?
I agree. You know, I think what's really interesting about Social Justice Bermuda, the people that are involved are generally people that have been throughout their lives pretty vocal about different issues. So it's a collective of people that were very used to holding the government's feet to the fire, regardless of who was in the government, right? So I think we're now doing it collectively, but it's things that we would have been doing individually anyway. And so that's what I, appreciate about what Katori is saying is that, that's the job of any citizen. That's our right. That's our right, our opportunity, our job to hold them responsible. So we'll get requests or we'll get like statements saying like, oh, you're not looking at this, or this is something and you should be talking about it. It's like, girl, Sarah, you could be talking about it. There is like literally, there's nothing to prevent anybody, which we've seen from, all of the things that have mobilized recently. There's nothing to prevent someone who feels passionate about an issue from mobilizing around that issue. That is, we're here in a free-ish society. And so, that means that, we have that opportunity. Does it come easily? No. Will you maybe experience a backlash to your life? Yes. Is that something you can absorb? Maybe not, but it is your right and your opportunity to do that. So yeah, I think, we do serve in a lot of ways as an opposition, but so does everybody coming out and speaking about whatever is happening that they're not pleased with. Like, we are the opposition collectively, the community, especially since there's only the 6 of those other lots. So I think. Anyway.
And to be fair, we've actually sat on both sides of the political divide, and some of us are all in the middle. So we've got people who would have held, as Kristen said, the government to account no matter who was in power. But it just happens to be the PLP now, but any day it could be anybody. So
Right, whether it be the OBA or the FDM or some new entity, whatever the case.
exactly. And we intend to hold whoever it is to account.
And we are politically neutral. We've said it a million times. And I think we should see that, should see that by the fact that we are equal opportunity harassers of both people. We want Marcus Jones to be removed from the Senate the same way we wanted Rolf Commission to be removed from the Senate. There's no one off of our radar.
I know that you guys have a lot of different positions on your platform. We didn't get to them all tonight, but I'm going to give everyone a last word, and maybe it might be food equality or one of the other programs that you have to talk about. And we'll start with Misha.
Okay, so I'm a little bit out of the loop, to be honest. I had a second kid less than 2 months ago now. I've been taking a paternity leave from the kids. Thanks, everybody. But yeah, I've been primarily involved in the coordination of the cannabis team and to some regard in the education task force. I think we've talked about that already, though. I encourage everyone to take some time to read through the material the government's put out. It's not all just for show, and if you don't engage with the process, you're going to get what you get, as opposed to making your opinion heard. And you'll be surprised how many people might share the same viewpoint that you do, regardless of your political affiliation, like everyone's mentioned here. Economic equity. One thing we didn't mention that's on the platform that I think would make big changes in just the culture of work in Bermuda is the sharing of salaries. Right now, that's still, outside of unionized positions, there's inequity in pay scales, not just between expats and Bermudians, which is, maybe amplified here, but it's not unusual. I myself have been an expat in another country and have been paid significantly more than a local. I know it's not unique to where we are, but that doesn't mean that has to be the status quo.
Okay, Kristen?
Yeah, I think definitely I want to shed some light on the healthcare team. They did some incredible work around the food security initiative, and they got an entire database of all of the resources that are out there to help people grow their own food. We also put an extensive document in the paper around Women's History Month and the International Women's Day around domestic violence reform. We have also spoken extensively around the issues of gang violence and how that is connected to systems of poverty and racial inequity. And so, yeah, there's so much on our platform. So I guess what I mostly want to say is to encourage people to read it. And if they feel moved, to reach out to us, because we could always use more people who want to be active, who want to be engaged, and who want to do the work. That's the issue. We are a very small team, and I know that, we have been vocal on a lot of issues. And then there are some that we've written statements about and run out of time to get them out, or and then the topic moves on and we're on to something else. Like, it's hard because, as Misha has pointed out, we are a group of volunteers who are parents, who are students, who are entrepreneurs, who are, workers, and we're doing this in our spare time, which, that's the nature of volunteering and activism. But it's great when you have more people moved and inspired to act. Like you said, between our marches and then, of course, the monumental work of Black Lives Matter Bermuda to get 7,000 people out into the streets, those were people that felt called to act. So acting is not just marching. And so we would love to get people really active. It doesn't necessarily mean with us. You can join CURB, you can join the Family Center, any charities that are out there looking for volunteers. You know, being an activist is not just about being loud. It's literally just about acting, being active, and being passionate about whatever your cause is. So it's just a matter of, you know, making sure that if you feel inspired by what we're doing, you can join us or join someone else. But sort of
Offer
sitting
your
back,
expertise for sure. That's definitely
your
where we have a
time
gap right
and
now.
your talent and your expertise with us or any group that you feel called to.
And if they want to help with you, how can they do that?
So there's a form right on our website at socialjusticebda.com. It's on the home page, and it asks you to click any of the areas that you're interested in, and then the task force leader of that group can reach out to you to sort of understand what your capacity is, what your interest is. But yeah, the form is right there. We also send out newsletters, and we're also on social media. So even if you don't have the time to join or be active, just sharing or amplifying a message, retweeting, you know, sharing on your own Facebook page, that makes a big difference too. So however people feel moved to act, we would love to have them act.
And Katura, last but not least.
I will be concise because they've covered most of what I would have said. A lot of this work is being done behind the scenes. So what I'd really like to highlight is that our criminal justice team, independent of the cannabis sub-task force, has been really hard at work constructing a policy brief which addresses the mental health of our imprisoned population. And at the end of the day, I think that when we think of vulnerable populations, very few of us think of our people who are incarcerated, who are 100% dependent on the state to live and to survive. So when we're talking about things like mental health and physical health and self-care, really difficult to do if you're incarcerated. So we've spoken within our task force about doing something to assist the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of National Security to sort of come together and tackle some of these issues with some of our prisoners. So mental health in prison is a huge topic for us. Hopefully we can share some of that work with you later, but right now there is a lot of work that is going on behind the scenes. And so if just to piggyback off of what Kristen and Misha were saying, if there is something that is true to your heart and near and dear to you, it's very possible that we're already working on it. So please join a task force, lend your expertise. We'd love to hear from you and hear what you have to say and incorporate it.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time. And we want to thank Katura Horton-Parenti, Kristen White, and Misha Fubler from Social Justice Bermuda to help celebrate part of their 1-year anniversary with us tonight. It's the first year, but not the last. And they'll be around being a thorn in politicians and businesses and everyone else.
We're trying to be helpful, Don. We're not trying to be thorns.
We're not thorns. We're the rose that is.
That's right.
We're the rose that maybe sometimes has a little thorn on the side, but really
prick their conscience.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. On behalf of Burr News, I'm your host, Don Burgess, and as always, have a beautiful evening.